Number 10. What if the X-Men had lost Inferno? This very chaotic and fire-filled demon horde-infested story comes to us from What If Volume 2, issue number 6. And we are starting it off hot, friends. This is quite a dark story. Here we get to imagine what the fate of the world would have been like had the X-Men failed in defeating Madeline Pryor during the events of Inferno. Instead, she and Sim take over the planet Earth, unleashing hordes of demons on it and ruling it together. However, the heroes who have survived their reign of terror manage to band together and, using their power, fight back. In the end, they do win the day, but not without casualties. Wolverine himself in the story ends up becoming the pet of the Goblin Queen, and Sim fully giving into his feral rage and feeding on the innocent. Ooh. He only becomes free from the fog of his rage after he kills Kitty Pryde tragically and realizes the monster that he has become. Number 9. What if Captain America were revived today? 1983. Because there's another one of these from like, I think 1994, so yeah, but that's in volume 2. We're going to volume 1. There are actually a few different stories involving Captain America being revived in the modern day or simply evolving with time as it passed. So 1994, and I think there's also another one of them which might even be on this list. But in this What If from volume 1, issue 44, we get a darker take on what a modern day Cap could look like in the 80s. This version of the hero ends up turning America into a heavily monitored and policed country during his witch hunt for communists. Fortunately, as dark as that all is, we learn that this isn't the real Captain America but an imposter that took his place after he went MIA. The real Cap returns and battles it out with imposter Cap, but in the end, the real Captain America turns to the people of America to undo all the damage done. He asks them to take responsibility, as while they were led to this point by a false version of him, they also allowed themselves to be led falsely. It's honestly a really good speech that even today rings true in a lot of ways, at least for me, and it provides the silver lining and shining hope for an otherwise pretty dark tale. Little grains of hope, that's all we need. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want more what if lists, be sure to let us know by giving this a thumbs up, sharing it, doing all the things. Also, if you want more what if content, we do have a playlist now for that. Yay! Number 8. What if Wolverine killed the Hulk? In issue 31 of the 1977 What If series, we find out what would happen if instead, when Wolverine first met the Hulk, he had killed him. Wolverine goes on to celebrate his victory against the big green Goliath after killing him, having some drinks and throwing some punches like he usually does at the local tavern. However, in the end, things get out of hand and he accidentally kills one of the patrons in a rage. When he seeks help from the military to protect and defend him, they actually turn their back on Wolverine, and so he ends up joining the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He becomes a sleeper agent for Magneto, infiltrating the X-Men. However, when Magneto finally plans on enacting his plan to defeat and capture the X-Men, Wolverine has a change of heart, feeling as though he has truly found acceptance and a family with the mutant team of heroes. He battles Magneto one-on-one, and the two kill one another in the end. It's a pretty tragic tale. Basically, all what ifs with Wolverine I feel like are usually pretty sad. Pretty sad or pretty dark. Number 7. What if Captain America had not vanished during World War II? See, another Captain America story because I love these. This story comes to us from issue 5 of volume 1, aka the 1977 What If series. While Captain America does not get trapped in the ice and Bucky never goes missing, presumed dead, only to become brainwashed and repurposed by the Soviet Union as the Winter Soldier, a worse fate seemingly awaits both of these heroes. Neither having ever disappeared, Steve goes on to fight as Captain America until he eventually retires from the mantle, becoming instead the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Bucky ends up taking his place, becoming the new Cap, as we have also seen happen in modern comics, and Rick Jones ends up becoming Buck's new sidekick, also going by the mantle of Bucky. Because I guess Rick or Ricky just doesn't have the same zing to it? Sadly though, Cap Bucky ends up dying on a mission, and Sharon Carter, Agent 13, who had hoped to settle down with Bucky after his final mission, blames Steve for his death. She actually accuses him of robbing him of his childhood and putting him in danger. Pretty intense. And then of course it ends with Rick volunteering to become the new Cap, so the deadly cycle it seems is destined to still continue in this timeline. You'd feel like after that all happened, Steve might be like, maybe we won't do that again, it didn't go great the last time. But he's just like, ah yes, Rick Jones, now you will be Captain America, and probably die. What if the Green Goblin stole the Infinity Gauntlet? This story comes to us from the What If Infinity Dark Reign one-shot. Here we see Green Goblin dealing with a lot of family drama and trauma from his past. He steals the Infinity Gauntlet and not only uses it to defeat, well, all the heroes of planet Earth and beyond, but it's also revealed that his true motivation for doing all of this and pretty much everything that he's done is to win his father's approval. His father, who was always so unimpressed and who for a long time mistreated him, pushing Norman towards greatness or else. When Norman showcases his villainous accomplishments, it only causes his father to revile him even more though. Norman then decides to use his Infinity Gauntlet to snap and influence his father, making him proud of him instead. But this makes his father's love and approval feel pretty empty, especially when Norman learns that his altered dad actually really only loves him just because he's his son, and not for all that he has accomplished. Which you would think would be really nice, but to Norman he's like, that's infuriating, I hate that. Norman erases his father from existence, and in so doing, erases himself. Don't you hate when that happens? Number 5. Marvel Zombies Resurrection. While not an exact what if series, Marvel Zombies Resurrection definitely feels like a what-if version of the Marvel Zombies world that imagines a completely new scenario involving zombies based on established Marvel lore, where Galactus becomes infected with a mysterious new virus that it turns out was created by the Brood, dun dun dun, to infect people more efficiently, turning them instead into zombies. The whole series from 2020 and the intro to it from 2019 that kind of explains all of the lore that you need to know to jump in is all pretty bleak, with only a few people on Earth making it out alive in the end, and still fighting basically just to survive after the world has pretty much been completely infected after Galactus' corpse is hurled to the Earth to be used as a kind of zombie creating bomb. But while the story is pretty dark in terms of all the great heroes that we lose, do not worry. At least Carol's Flurkin cat Chewie stays safe. Thank goodness. In case like me you read this and you were worried the whole time about that little fur baby, I was like, no, please don't let Chewie die, Chewie's so cute. Chewie is also a badass, so really there's no need to worry. Chewie's like one of the best fighters in this entire series, which I love. Number 4. What if Clint Barton killed Norman Osborn during Dark Reign? This what if comes answered in the What If Dark Reign one-shot. Here we get to see what could have happened had Clint Barton's plan to kill Norman Osborn actually come together. Clint himself ends up making a martyr out of Osborn though, unfortunately, and becomes a wanted man in the process. One civilian decides to take the matter of justice into his own hands, calling out the assassin, Clint Francis Barton. And if he doesn't show himself, he threatens to blow up the entire Sunday Inn and all the innocent people that are inside it. Hawkeye does show up though and attempts to talk the man down, but surprisingly the man pulls a gun and shoots Clint point blank to death rather than surrender. He is taken away, and in the end Hammer remains in control under Deputy Director, likely now full director actually, Victoria Hand. Basically, if Hawkeye had actually killed Norman Osborn, it would be bad, I think, in the long run. I think that's what we learned. Number 3. What if the Kingdom of Cain? In What If issue 94 out of the 1989 series, also known as Volume 2, we get to visit a world destroyed by the Sentinels. Oh goody. The Sentinels did not only take out all of mutant kind supposedly, but also killed all of Earth's mightiest heroes besides, and its general population of non-powered individuals who were killed by high levels of radiation that the Sentinels emitted. The only one to survive all this destruction is Juggernaut, who wanders the Earth for years reminiscing on his past and all of his wrongdoings, and feeling unbearably lonely all the while. Poor Juggernaut. Magneto shows up and confirms that everything that has come to pass is Juggernaut's fault because he killed Professor X, which was basically the catalyst event for this chain reaction of destruction that has now come to pass. Juggernaut finds and kind of falls into a secret bunker as a result of his fight with Magneto, where he learns that some mutants survived and are actually hiding out. Yay! When they ask him to leave them be though, he refuses, only to learn that this was an attempt to protect themselves against the radiation, which he is now let in by breaking into the bunker, infecting them and ultimately sentencing them to death. So it's really sad. Juggernaut's like, I'm lonely, I just want to talk to you, and they're just like, you just killed us, so thanks for that. He's like, wow, I ruin everything, this is terrible. Number 2. What If the Traitor? In this alternate tale that comes to us from the 1989 volume of What If issue -1, we get to see what would happen if Trevor Fitzroy went back in time to try and convince Professor X to never create the X-Men. Although Bishop travels back in time to try and stop Fitzroy, it doesn't end up working out. Fitzroy shows the professor of the future to come and all the war and prosecution that mutants will suffer. When Professor X meets Bishop, he inquires of Jean's fate and learns that she perishes, but that he and his X-Men remain a symbol of hope for the people. Unable to accept the dark future that awaits, however, Professor X seemingly agrees, despite Bishop's pleas, to never let the X-Men form, and Bishop ends up being locked up in prison in the past, with both Fitzroy and Bishop believing the other is the traitor. But who's really the traitor? Number 1. What if Spider-Man Back in Black? This story reimagines what would have happened had MJ ended up being shot by the Kingpin's hitman instead of Aunt May. Mary Jane as such does not end up in intensive care hanging to life by a thread, but instead dies pretty much instantly. This makes Peter lose control, going into a dark rage unlike any we've ever seen. He doesn't just plan on scaring and potentially finishing the Kingpin if MJ dies, because I mean she's already dead, but instead he plans on just straight up setting out to kill whoever was responsible for the hit, which he of course does find out was still Kingpin in this reality. Donning his black costume, he heads out planning to put an end to Kingpin once and for all, despite Aunt May and Iron Man trying to stop him and calm him down. In the end, Peter succeeds in killing Kingpin, Aunt May basically disowns him, and Iron Man has him arrested for murder, citing the Superhero Registration Act. Peter blames Iron Man for all this mess, by the way, demanding a trial with a jury, and Iron Man denies any wrongdoing, claiming Peter made his choice.
Off the list with number 10, What If the Juggernaut? Okay, to start this sad list, we got What If starring the Juggernaut. It was released in 1997, written by George Gonzalez, and we kick off in a world where Sentinels have already wiped out all superheroes. Great start. Plus there's this toxic gas that's filling up the atmosphere which will kill all of life. So things are beginning grim right off the bat, okay. And all that's left now at this point is just the Juggernaut. Now he's hunting down these Sentinels. He wants to die, but his own invulnerability won't let that happen. Kind of like Hulk the End, just a sad strong man in a world full of rubble. So he sees Iron Man's helmet, he sees Cyclops' cracked visor. He's just walking down horrible memory lane. Then he meets a couple of surviving mutants and they're not in good condition, mentally, I mean. They're actually blaming Juggernaut for killing the X-Men, and it all ends with Juggernaut knowing he's going to be the last living being on the planet and that it's his own damn fault. And before we go on to number 9 for our next sad what if story, if you guys could go ahead and please like this video, or else we'll be on a what if you didn't like the video, and then it's going to be a sad video on all the alternate futures where you didn't like our videos. So please go ahead and do that, because that would be great. You guys are the best, thank you so much. Now back to the list. Number 9, what if Cable had destroyed the X-Men? Well, this one just sounds bad right off the hop. So after Professor X came back to Earth, the team was never going to be the same again. At this X-Men meeting, Xavier gets in a fight with Cable, and then all of a sudden it turns into Cable and his crew versus everybody, and it was just this big brawl. Now they escape, but later on, Cable kills Xavier, Jean, and Scott with a siren bomb. So now everybody's deciding on what to do with this guy. Wolverine's team wanted to kill him, and Storm's team wanted to bring him in. Both are pretty bad. So the Avengers have to step in and fight their battles while they're all working their own stuff out over there. So the Avengers are like, just do your thing, we're gonna go fight your bad guys, just wrap it up. But eventually Cable and his team is killed by Wolverine's team. Number 8, what if Wolverine battled Conan the Barbarian? Written by Glenn Herdling and released in 1990, what if Wolverine had battled Conan the Barbarian? So basically Conan and Wolverine switched dimensions. So we have Wolverine causing trouble in the Hyborian age alongside Red Sonja, and Conan smashes Cyclops in the head with a rock, which causes the full fury of the Phoenix Force to be unleashed. So now this has caused a ripple effect, so the psychic rapport was shattered, and without Wolverine to hurl Colossus at her, there's nothing that prevents Jean Grey from transforming into her dark persona before she can destroy herself, resulting in the destruction of the entire universe. So just like that, Cyclops gets hit with a rock and then it all goes to shit. So yeah, crossovers are for sure fun, but you gotta look at the possible ways it could go poorly as well. Wolverine versus Conan the Barbarian is definitely one of those ways. Number 7, what if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? In this reality, Professor X is the one who becomes Juggernaut and gets buried. Now this causes him to go down a completely different path when it comes down to the X-Men, because after this, he never ended up creating the X-Men because he was stuck. So now the Fantastic Four wants to defeat Magneto instead. So Professor X, he's still listening. He's using his mind powers. He's knowing what's going on out there. He's kind of getting pissed that he's not able to go out and help. So he digs his way out, and his telepathy powers are now stronger than ever with his new Juggernaut super strength. So he takes over the country with his own X-Men posse to enforce these anti-human laws. So Cyclops even sided with Magneto at this point because he could block Xavier's telepathy. So they're battling it out on Asteroid M, and Cyclops is trying to remind Xavier about his original dream, you know, with humans and mutants living together in harmony. And before he could really consider it, the ground beneath him exploded and he got launched into space, probably forever. And man, that's gotta be boring. Imagine not dying in space. That sounds like an absolute nightmare. This should be number 1 maybe, I don't know. Number 6, what if the Hulk died and Kyra lived? Written by Greg Pak, released in 2007. Okay, so we start with the Hulk saving Kyra by throwing her out of the way of the explosion instead of the ship. So now the Hulk had died along with Crown City. And Kyra, she's pretty pissed, right? She takes all the old power from the planet and gets ready with her sights set on Earth. She's coming. First stop, of course, being the moon, where she defeats Black Bolt and then implants a obedience disc on him. So when Strange and Sentry come to the rescue, she makes Black Bolt use his sonic scream, which of course results in both of them dying. She's killing everybody fast, okay? So Heroim comes to stop her and says that basically if you kill everybody on Earth, nobody can honor your dead husband. So she says, fine, but you're gonna wish you were dead instead. And then it cuts to 21 years later, and she's made all the remaining heroes build this massive Hulk statue. And when it's finally done, she walks onto the hand of the statue and then turns it to stone, joining him. The end. Yeah, how sad is that? I mean, I feel like it wouldn't take those guys 21 years to build a statue. I mean, if they're getting paid by the hour, sure, then by all means, go for it. Number 5, what if the Avengers had never been? Written by Jim Shooter and Gil Kane, released in 1977. This was actually the first what if issue with a major death. So of course it has to be on the list somewhere. So we start off with the Hulk. Now this time he's not hitting, he's actually quitting. Now this caused the Avengers to dismantle. So Stark asked Rick Jones to find the Hulk, Thor went back to Asgard, and Jan and Hank went back to living as normal people. So Rick finds him, but he's now being held hostage from the Green Giant. So Stark swoops in and saves him, and they head back to the Avengers mansion. So Namor and the Hulk call out the Avengers, or rather what's left of them. So Iron Man makes a few iron suits for the others, and the suits, I mean, they aren't Tony Stark. They can't control these things nearly as well as he can. Unless you're in the movie Iron Man 3, then everyone can do that all of a sudden. So they stay in retirement. They're like, screw that, I don't want any part of that. So he's like, whatever. He powers up his own suit a little bit too much, and then he heads to the battle alone. He fights a bit, and then right when he's about to be ended, the rest show up. Jan, Hank, and Rick are back. Nice. So Tony is done at this point. His armor is weak, he's close to being finished off, so he uses his remaining power to regenerate Hank's armor. So the Hulk snaps out of it and goes after Namor, while the rest of our heroes mourn over a fallen Tony Stark, who sacrificed himself to save his team. Similar vibes to Endgame. A lot of feels in that one, okay? A lot of feels. A good number 5 feels train. Number 4, what if somebody else besides Spider-Man had been bitten by the radioactive spider? Written by Don Glut, released in 1977, we get to see a dream play out. Look, we've all probably wanted to be Spider-Man at one point or another. Of course, I mean, doing backflips and swinging downtown, that's gotta be the vibe. But of course, when it comes to stopping criminals and taking out supervillains, it's probably pretty stressful. So in this what if, we get to see this idea play out. We see other characters have a crack at the life of the web slinger, starting with Flash Thompson. And let's just say it's a lot harder than it looks. So we got Flash Thompson. Now after he gets bit, he teaches a bad driver a lesson, and he feels pretty good with his new given abilities, and he plays it out a bit. So he decides to take a crack at professional wrestling, maybe make some cash, which is a pretty good idea. I mean, you're a superhero, so you can definitely win most, if not all, fights. But he accidentally kills the guy. Sorry, oops. Then Betty Brant is now up with the powers. Okay, so let's see how she would do in the life. Well, her costume for starters is pretty badass. But when she runs out of web fluid while making TikToks, a thief runs by and gets away. And that thief, of course, being the one to take Uncle Ben's life. So far, so bad. Now finally, we have our third contender with the powers. John Jameson. While his outfit was also pretty good, he couldn't do the job like Peter, and he actually died while trying to prevent a space shuttle from crashing. I guess it's not as easy as it looks. I mean, to be fair, if something actually happened and it had webs, I really wouldn't know what to do. I would do a backflip and be like, is it fixed? No? It was cool though. Number 3. What if the Punisher killed Daredevil? We all know the Punisher as the guy who usually brutally kills criminals. See, with superheroes, those guys he likes to hit with a tranquilizer. But in this what if, we see Daredevil get hit with one of those tranq darts and fall off a building. So while Kingpin prepared for his next step now that he's out of the way, Spider-Man stepped in to deliver some justice on Frank Castle. So he finds the Punisher, and Punisher has no tranq darts left. So he shoots Spider-Man in the shoulder. It's messy, but not fatal, he says. He should survive unless he exerts himself, which he does. And his identity is then revealed. Then it cuts to Aunt May's house, and she grabs a paper, reads the shocking headline, and then the house explodes from a missile launched from the Silvermane City. Boom, house gone. And then after a little while, Peter shows up in a hospital gown, ready to get some revenge on Frank. Peter does pretty well in the fight, so well he's actually just moments away from throwing the Punisher off of a building to his death. But the Punisher stalls and says he has info about his Aunt May, and this slows Peter down for just a split second, allowing for the Punisher to unload on Peter. God, imagine if they introduced Frank Castle in the MCU and then they immediately did something like this. Number 2, what if Kraven the Hunter had killed Spider-Man? Released in 1990, written by Richard Howell. Yeah, judging by this title alone, this one's a little sad. I figured we're already on the Spider-Man misfortune train, so I had to throw this one in next, you know? What if Kraven had killed Spider-Man? Okay, so we start with Pete patrolling the streets when he's suddenly trapped by Kraven in a net, and just like that, he unloads, killing Peter Parker. And of course, he eats a bunch of spiders and suits up himself to celebrate. Yeah, you eat a bunch of spiders, now you're Spider-Man. That's how it works. I think a human eats like, what, 7 spiders in a year when they're sleeping? So we have like, what, 7,000 to go? So now he's Spider-Man, just like that, cool. Meanwhile, MJ is like, where on earth is that Peter Parker guy? And then MJ is approached by a couple of thugs, and then in comes Spider-Man to save her. Only it's Kraven, but she doesn't know that. But she can tell something's up because Spider-Man doesn't recognize her, and he's way more brutal with taking out these thugs. So Cap, Daredevil, and Human Torch jump in to see what's up with the wall crawler. They did a decent job of wearing down the beast, but he needed more power. He ate a bunch of spiders earlier, so now it's only fair if he tries to eat Spider-Man's dead body, right? Comics are weird. So MJ tells Cap and the gang that Spider-Man is actually Peter Parker, and that the Spider-Man is indeed not the same. And then Aunt May goes into denial hearing about the news. She's messed up now for life. And the media isn't happy with the tension between supers and the public. The story ends with MJ standing at Peter's funeral, wondering how things could have been. God, Peter just can't catch a break, eh? Oh my God. And finally, number 1, the saddest of them all, what if Wolverine father? Written by Rob Williams, released in 2011, we start off with Wolverine taking out the Winter Soldier. And we see a world with Wolverine and Daken if they had spent their life growing together as father and son. So now we get to see what it would have been like if Logan was there for them the whole time. Now in this reality, they're named John. This life, however, was filled with repression and lies and led to John leaving his home and rising up as Daken, becoming the leader of the Japanese underworld. So Wolverine tried to save him, but because of the way he was raised with this version of Logan, he looked at him like a monster. He viewed himself as a monster too. This is the Muramasa blade, John, says Logan as he stabs him. Healing factors don't work on it. The issue ends with the boy dying beside his father, and Logan uses the same blade on himself. And that's the end. That's the end of the comic. Everyone dies, everyone's sad. That's what ifs for you, right there.
And at number 10, what if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? From What If issue 13 volume 2, here we have a story in which Charles Xavier becomes the Juggernaut. It's a simple answer to what would happen. Xavier ends up getting buried alive. But the consequences are much greater. Because of this, he's never able to create the X-Men, leaving the Fantastic Four responsible for taking on Magneto. It gets worse, snowballing into some major anti-mutant hysteria. Eventually, Xavier manages to dig himself out of the ground, but it's too late for him to try to change the world for the better. He ends up using his super strength combined with his powerful psychic abilities to take over the US and enforce anti-human laws, using the X-Men to do so. In the process, he ends up defeating a lot of major Marvel characters, including the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Doctor Doom, Iron Man, Daredevil, and even the Hulk. Russia then tries to bomb the US, which is the catalyst for World War III. Xavier steps up, finding a way to make the Earth livable despite all the damage from the bomb, and ends up becoming the supreme leader of the planet. His only ask? That mutants aren't treated like crap. More mutants are born thanks to the bomb radiation, making up almost half of the planet's population. But despite the world finding some sort of peace, Xavier has gone mad, and in secret the remaining heroes and superpowered characters plot his demise, no longer believing in his dream since mutants now openly terrorize humans. This leads to a clash between Xavier and several of the X-Men on Asteroid M, with Quicksilver using explosives to launch Xavier into space, a potentially temporary solution that leaves Cyclops, Jean Grey, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver with the responsibility of trying to repair the world in the meantime. Talk about a hefty storyline. And at number 9, what if Wolverine had lived during the age of Conan the Barbarian? Conan the Barbarian has made many an appearance in What If comics over the years. In this story though, which appears in What If Volume 2 Issue 16, Wolverine is transported to another time. Within the first few panels he slays a T-Rex, impressing the locals. He finds himself completely immersing himself in the culture, getting a new outfit, and not understanding a damn word that anyone is saying. Eventually he crosses paths with Conan, a battle ensues, and Conan slits Wolverine's throat. Thinking he's killed him, he walks away, but little does he know that Wolverine has a mutant healing factor. He pursues him, more shenanigans ensue, and Wolverine ends up staying in Conan's world, with Conan being teleported back out to where the X-Men are battling on the moon. And he also ends up with Sonya, who looks just like Jean Grey apparently. Oh, redheads. And at number 8, What If? X-Men Wedding Album. Issue 60 from Volume 2 of the What If series explored a specific theme. It contains a slew of stories related to Cyclops and Jean Grey's relationship, exploring different facets and possibilities. There's What If Scott Summers and Jean Grey had married earlier, which sees the couple marrying earlier on during the beginnings of the mutant team. Another one is What If Scott Summers and Jean Grey had never fallen in love at all, which results in Cyclops leaving the X-Men team altogether. Then there's What If Phoenix had fallen for Wolverine, perhaps the most tragic tale of them all, which involves the X-Men disbanding, ultimately thanks to the fact that all of the characters die. The framing for the entire issue revolves around the mainstream Earth 616 continuity of Jean and Scott, particularly pertaining to X-Men Volume 2 Issue 30, in which the two have their wedding. And at 7, What If Cable had destroyed the X-Men? This one comes from What If Volume 2 Issue 46, which was released in 1993. Its narrative follows Charles Xavier returning to Earth after being on a hiatus, only to discover that his X-Men teams have all strayed significantly. He holds meetings with each of the teams only to get into a fight with Cable, in which a battle ensues. Some side with Xavier while others side with Cable, and Cable ends up fleeing. Later on he assassinates Xavier along with Jean Grey and Scott Summers, killing them when they least expect it by launching a siren bomb at their dinner table. This causes a major disturbance between the members of all the X teams, dividing them, causing them to fight amongst themselves. In the meantime, the teams outside of the mutant-based ones are forced to pick up the slack. The Avengers and Fantastic Four are fighting off typical X-Men villains since the X-Men are too busy beating each other up instead. There's a massive fight and Wolverine's team of mutants clashes with Cable's team, killing Cable and his pals. Everything kind of falls apart there, with Magneto swooping in to try to get the remaining members of these battle-worn teams to join up with him. And talk about being an opportunist. Can you blame him though? And at 6, What If Wolverine was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.? This one might be my personal favorite. From What If Volume 2 Issue 7, first released in 1989, here we have Wolverine, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. The timeline diverges from the 616 timeline after Wolverine encounters the Wendigo with the Hulk. After that battle, he goes on loan to S.H.I.E.L.D. for a single mission to help them retrieve a stolen LMD tech. Hydra of course is the culprit behind the theft. Nick Fury and Wolverine hunt down the LMD robots and destroy them, one of which includes a decoy of Dum Dum Dugan. Upset about this revelation, Fury sends Wolverine and Black Widow to hunt down any other LMDs possibly infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D. Turns out half of the crew on board of their ship were robots. The trio then set out to hit Hydra's base and rescue the real Dum Dum, which has them crossing paths with Madame Hydra and Baron von Strucker, who is in possession of the Satan Claw. A brawl ensues, with S.H.I.E.L.D. being victorious. Fury then offers Wolverine a spot permanently on the team, and Logan, wanting a change of pace, agrees. It's around this time on 616 that he'd be joining up with the X-Men anyway. Logan rises in the ranks, becoming Fury's number 2, and later on, Fury is murdered by a Strucker LMD seeking revenge, who takes him out in his flying Ferrari nonetheless. Gotta love the 80s. At Fury's funeral, Dum Dum retires, which makes Logan the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. This has a powerful domino effect on the world. Using S.H.I.E.L.D., Wolverine prevents several major events in the Marvel Universe, including the creation of Sentinels, Dark Phoenix's emergence, there's no Mutant Registration Act, and overall it improves human and mutant relations for the better. Kind of hurts to see the potential Logan had at S.H.I.E.L.D., doesn't it? But on a different note, fun fact, another story in this issue is what if Aunt May was a mutant with claws? So I mean, that's one hell of a reminder that this is a what if issue. In at number 5, what if the X-Men had stayed in Asgard? Based on the comic New Mutants Special Edition Issue 1, What If the X-Men Had Stayed in Asgard is a riff off of a story in which concluded with them leaving Asgard to return to Earth. The premise is very self-explanatory here. The X-Men all vote, and those who wish to leave are sent home by Loki. The rest of the story follows the lives of these remaining X-Men and how they assimilate into Asgardian culture. Rogue finds love, being able to touch the Asgardian people. Mirage becomes a Valkyrie. Storm becomes the goddess of thunder, and Loki attempts to trick her into slaying his brother, who has been transformed into a frog. Hela then attacks Asgard, and the X-Men alongside Thor, who is eventually transformed back to his normal self, fight her and her army. They defeat her, and Thor returns to Earth, giving Storm the throne and Asgard to rule. And Loki? Well, for the tricks that he played in getting the X-Men to stay, he slowly goes mad by the end of the comic, thanks to the ones who sit above in shadow. Moving on to number 4, what if the new X-Men had died on their very first mission? Coming out of What If Volume 2 Issue 9, this comic book has a wonderful cover. It's Charles Xavier being pushed away from the X-Men's funeral by Beast, shouting out up into the heavens, "The X-Men are dead and I killed them!" The concept for this one places the original X-Men and the new X-Men being killed off on their mission, with Xavier telepathically feeling each and every one of their deaths. Beast, the only X-Men member to not have gone on this mission, tries to console the depressed Xavier. Count Nefaria sees how weakened the X-Men are and attacks, which forces Beast into forming a new ragtag team that consists of himself, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Siren, Warpath, and Namorita, the female version of Namor. This new team end up fighting and defeating Count Nefaria, and Xavier, seeing this new team all put together, begins to come out of his depression, asking the new team to stay on and become official X-Men. All works out for the best. I mean, except, all of the original ones are dead, but hey. Moving on to number 3, what if Wolverine had killed the Hulk? From What If Volume 1 Issue 13, we see a rehashing of Wolverine's first appearance in the comics, when he first crossed paths with the Hulk in the Incredible Hulk issue 181. Although he technically made a cameo in the issue prior, but cameo. It was like in a panel. Now in that story, Wolverine and the Hulk initially see each other as a threat before teaming up together to take down the Wendigo. But in this story though, Wolverine and the Hulk duke it out. And rather than being interrupted by the Wendigo, which initially causes them to stop fighting each other, the Wendigo never shows up. This ends up resulting in Wolverine fatally wounding the Hulk, and leads to him fleeing from authorities despite his attacks being out of self-defense. Because he's on the run, he doesn't join the X-Men. Instead, he teams up with Magneto and joins the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, with his first assignment being to infiltrate the X-Men. He does, but in the process grows close to the mutant team, and when the time comes for him to double-cross them, he just can't do it. Instead, he turns on Magneto, and Magneto and Wolverine fight, with them killing each other in the process. And at number 2, what if Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires? This one's great. Here's a what if story that should be familiar to some of you who frequent our channel. From What If Volume 2 Issue 24, what if Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires? Tells the tale of Wolverine and the X-Men crossing paths with none other than Count Dracula. The two fight, and Wolverine gets bitten, becoming a vampire himself. But thanks to his willpower, he's able to evade Dracula's mind control abilities, and ends up fighting him for dominance. Wolverine succeeds and kills him, and then proceeds to transform all of the other X-Men into vampires, with him and his new army going around biting beloved heroes and draining them of their blood. Eventually, for some reason that I swear totally makes sense, Doctor Strange has taken over the body of the Punisher and goes after Wolverine, and manages to get through to Logan in the end, stopping his blood reign of terror. And finally, and at number 1, what if Phoenix had not died? From What If Issue 27 Volume 1, we see the Watcher looking into an alternate reality in which Jean Grey did not die during the incursion with the Shi'ar. Rather, she was reborn. And when the X-Men find themselves facing off against Galactus and Terrax in the Shi'ar galaxy, the Phoenix rises and kicks some serious butt, stopping Galactus. But something is not right. Jean Grey is overwhelmed by the Phoenix Force and ends up losing control, destroying a star. Once back home on Earth at the X-Mansion, Kitty Pryde confronts Jean about the star that she destroyed. This does not bode well. Jean loses it and becomes Dark Phoenix, killing Kitty in response. The X-Men attempt to stop her, but her rampage continues. She ends up killing Polaris. Cyclops tries to intervene too, but Phoenix murders him as well. And it only gets worse from there. Jean entirely loses control and the Phoenix Force engulfs the entire world, destroying it, with it continuing to expand in the universe, consuming it all bit by bit. Talk about depressing. Number 10. What if Jane Foster had found the Hammer of Thor? This one isn't so strange for the premise, but it's more bizarre because of where the premise took us in the end. This is a story we've also seen adapted to the main continuity, though fortunately it does not quite share this same ending, which I'm pretty happy about, to be honest. Jane ends up finding the Hammer of Thor and becoming the goddess of storms, taking up the mantle Thordis. Lady Sif, missing Thor, ends up finding and falling in love with Donald Blake, who is later revealed of course to be the true Thor when Odin asks Thordis to return his hammer to him. As thanks for her service however, Odin makes Jane a goddess. However, as Jane was in love with Donald, who is now Thor and is in love with Lady Sif, her heart is broken and she has to be returned to her mortal self because of this. But Odin has a better solution and proposes to Jane, who agrees, to marry him, and then they all live happily ever after. With Jane finding that those very qualities she both admired and loved in the mortal Don Blake are also to be found in the father of immortal Thor. My goodness. That's a very strange ending to that story. How about instead of being with my son, you be with me, his father, haha. Okay, Odin, what? I feel like I like it better when Odin just doesn't really like Jane. I think that works more. Is that weird? Number 9. What if the Avengers were the last superheroes on Earth? This story allows us to imagine what the world would be like if all the superpowered beings on Earth were defeated by the Avengers. At the behest of the Scarlet Centurion, the Avengers attempt to eradicate all superpowered beings, including themselves. In the end, after all threats have been defeated, they decide to disband, being the last ones with powers, in order to usher in an era of peace on Earth. They all go off to live their own normal-ish lives. Thor returns to Asgard, Tony returns to being a billionaire playboy in Las Vegas, only to realize that it doesn't really bring him any joy and actually considers entering into politics. And Janet Van Dyne and Hank Pym actually seem to find quite a bit of happiness, going off and getting married and focusing on their time with one another, which is kind of sweet. I guess if they weren't superheroes it would work out pretty well for them. Scarlet Centurion does return to threaten Earth and forces the Avengers to come together one more time, but after defeating him, they once again go their separate ways back into retirement. And they also kind of question, like, if being a superhero is actually a bad thing, because does it create more problems than it solves? Just a quick reminder, if you love these what if lists, I personally love bringing them to you because these stories are amazing. Be sure to show us that love by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing, commenting, subscribing, all the things. Number 8. What if the Gamma Bomb spawned 1,000 Hulks? This story comes to us from volume 2 of the What If series that started back in 1989. In issue 71, we get to imagine a reality where instead of just one Hulk, or the members of the Hulk family plus Hulk, we had 1,000 of them, which I would say is ultimately too many Hulks. In this story, it was the bombing on Hiroshima that resulted in these thousands of Hulks coming into existence, survivors of the attack that were basically mutated, so they became Hulks. In the end, Bruce Banner, aka Hulk, who of course goes on to become the Hulk in the story, must attempt to stand up against this army and attempt to defeat it with the help of some friends. Number 7. What if Betty Brant, instead of Spider-Man, had been bitten by the radioactive spider? This one comes to us from a 3-part story and is simply one story within that. It is from the original What If series volume 1 from 1997, issue number 7. Here, Betty Brant, instead of Peter Parker, is the one bitten by the radioactive spider, gaining spider-like abilities. While the story isn't a strange premise at all, like I don't think it's weird for Betty Brant to become, a version of Spider-Man, what really makes this one stand out for me in terms of its weirdness is Betty's costume here, which is it's something. It's also odd that in this alternate reality, Betty happens to be the only alternate person to become Spider-Man that manages to survive the ordeal, with both John Jameson and Flash Thompson in this issue, who are featured in the other 2 stories, dying as a result of gaining spider powers and attempting to use them. Instead of Betty choosing not to pursue the thief that kills Peter's Uncle Ben, she simply is unable to because she used up all her web fluid posing for pictures for Peter. Which is a whole other thing, but also, wait, can't you just go after them anyways? Don't you have superpowers? It doesn't matter that your web fluid is gone. Anyways, she still blames herself for Uncle Ben's death and decides to quit being Spider Lady, which I think is a little harsh. I feel like she wasn't really super responsible for that, but I guess she could have gone after him. I don't know why she didn't do that. Be like, use your super strength, climb on walls, do any of the other things you can do. Number 6. What if Submariner never regained his memories? This story allows us to glimpse into an alternate reality where Namor never met the Human Torch and never ended up regaining his memories and returning to Atlantis, learning that he was the true ruler of the underwater kingdom. Instead, the Submariner remains unaware of his true heritage and ends up joining a ship's crew, finding himself inexplicably drawn to the sea. I wonder why. The captain of the ship, Namor's friend McCandless, ends up being mutineered against and goes overboard while injured when he believes they found the lost entrance to the center of the earth. Namor, or Mr. Smith as he's known, follows after him and ends up being retrieved from the ice-cold water by Inuits later on. They end up worshipping Namor as the Lord of the Frozen Sea, along with frozen Captain America, who they worship as the Lord of the Frozen Ice. And Namor's like, I guess this is my life now, and I'm pretty good with it. So I guess it all worked out in the end, and now he just gets to be the Lord of the Sea really far up north where it's cold. Cool, I guess? Number 5. What if Iron Man was trapped in the time of King Arthur? While all of these stories are based on things that actually did happen, this is also based on something that did happen, so if you think it sounds weird because it's just so random, that is a thing that actually happened, where Iron Man and Doctor Doom in main continuity traveled back to the time of Arthurian legend. However, rather than getting back home in this version while Doom manages to leave, he leaves Iron Man trapped in the past. Oh no! A weird turn of events ends up leaving Tony Stark as the ruler and king of England following the death of his friend King Arthur. Tony actually proves to be a great king and lives out his days there in the past just as an accomplished and celebrated ruler. I actually wonder what effect that would have had on the present, because I feel like everything would be very different if Tony Stark were the king of England. This all goes down in issue 33 of the 1997 What If series, so you can check that out if you want. Number 4. What if the Fantastic Four had different superpowers? One of them is just being a giant brain. It's true. Actually, overall, these powers feel very Doom Patrol meets X-Men in my opinion. In this alternate story, when subjected to cosmic radiation, the FF get completely different powers than what each member has in main continuity. Johnny becomes a robot, Ben gets dragon-like wings, Reed is just a disembodied brain, admittedly not a very great power, and Sue ends up with the least original powers, getting Reed's old powers instead, the ability to stretch her body like Taffy or Silly Putty. Really, I feel like Sue always gets sort of like the worst part of these stories whenever she's in a What If. Hers are always so like quick or just so kinda lame, and I'm like, dang, why doesn't Invisible Woman get some cool stuff? I think she was still Invisible Girl at this time though, maybe that's why. Number 3. What if Aunt May instead of her nephew Peter had been bitten by that radioactive spider? This story reimagines what would have happened if once again it was not Peter Parker who received the fateful radioactive spider bite, but instead was his elderly Aunt May. This is from a humor issue, so you know it's gonna be weird and you know it's gonna be great. And it is. Aunt May here ends up getting bit after realizing that Peter had left his lunch at home on the day he and his class were meant to visit the exhibit at the Science Institute. And if you're like, Amanda, it's not called the Science Institute. Seriously, if you go to this issue, that is what is written on the building in the Science Institute. Of what? We don't know. She successfully delivers the forgotten lunch to Peter, cottage cheese and mashed string beans, but ends up feeling unwell on her way home, and finds that she has developed superpowers. She makes her own costume, becoming Spider-Man, and ends up facing off in this story with the ridiculous villain, Leapfrog. Because that's just how it goes. Number 2. What if the Fantastic Four all had the stretching powers of Mr. Fantastic? Oh boy, I love this issue because we get 4 stories where we get to imagine what it would be like if multiple members of the FF shared basically the same powers. And in the one where they all get stretching powers, they just never end up becoming the Fantastic Four because their collective power is just considered, well, kinda lame. Sue in fact insists that they never let anyone know of their powers because she feels like, and I quote, a freak. Both Sue and Ben feel as though the stretching powers are ridiculous, monstrous, ugly, and dumb, while Reed and Johnny actually think they're pretty neat and even could be useful. Still, Sue and Ben's way of thinking wins out, so the Fantastic Four never become a superhero team. The end. Number 1. What if Thanos had changed Galactus into a human being? I really love this What If story personally. It comes to us from, once again, one of the humor issues of What If, so you know it's gonna be a riot. In this story, Thanos turns Galactus into a human being in order to defeat him, and Galactus ends up on Earth with no memory of who he was or is. He does, however, happen to look a lot like Elvis Presley, and even sings and plays like him too. He meets a woman named Gertrude who introduces him to the works of Presley, and Galactus is basically convinced that he must indeed be like an amnesiac version of Elvis Presley, returned from the dead. He goes on to have a successful music career, and when his memories are later restored by Adam Warlock, who also offers to return his power to him, he actually decides instead to stay on Earth and live out his life here as Elvis with Gertrude and her son Toby, which, I mean, fair enough. That sounds like a pretty good life. Number 10. What if Aunt May was a mutant with claws? I just love how this is posed as a scenario where Aunt May just uses her claws in place of the good old-fashioned parental guilt trip. Aunt May is having dinner with her nephew Peter and his girlfriend Mary Jane. She cooked for them and they immensely enjoyed their meal, but when she offers them a pie for dessert, they both insist they're just too full and they cannot eat another bite. They offer that after their date, they're going to see a show, they might have a slice upon their return. But this isn't good enough enough for Aunt May. Fortunately, in this story she has Wolverine claws, which she snicks out and uses to intimidate the youngsters into postponing their date so they can stay for dessert. She uses her claws, of course, to also slice the pie, because Aunt May. What else is she gonna use them for? Although I would really love an alternate world where Aunt May just was Wolverine. Or I was posing earlier an idea of an alternate world where everyone is Aunt May. What about that world? Number 9. What if Iron Man, demon in an armor? Remember that time Tony Stark and Victor Von Doom swapped bodies? Oh yeah, that's the thing that happened in this What If special out of 2010. Here both brilliant minds were roommates in college and Victor used a machine on Stark to swap minds with him. Stark's memories were also wiped, so he never knew he had been Tony Stark. Victor, as Tony, used his millions to create his own inventions, but ultimately ended up ruining the Stark name with less than noble pursuits and his own greed. On the other hand, Stark as Victor succumbed to alcoholism but recovered and then created Doom Industries, a brilliant company responsible for its own Doom armor suits and technological advancements. In the end, Doom in Stark's body attempted to attack Doom Industries but was apprehended by Stark in Doom's body. He then revealed the swap that had taken place years earlier and bargained to swap back in exchange for his freedom, but Stark in Doom's body is just like, nah thanks, I kinda have the better company and life now in your body. I like this body. Why would I want to be Tony now when I can just be the honorable Dr. Doom? Good point. Good point. Why would you ever want to be Tony Stark when you could be Dr. Doom? That's the real question. That'd be awesome. Number 8. What if Sergeant Fury had fought World War II in outer space? This story offers a glimpse into an alternate reality where World War II was fought in space? This story takes place in an alternate reality where instead of being divided by eastern and western fronts, the battle is divided between beta and alpha sectors. As such, we get to see Sergeant Nick Fury fighting alongside the Howling Commandos in outer space, smoking a cigar even while wearing a space helmet. Seems like a bad idea, but it's Nick Fury, so that's what he's gonna do. It's also explained that we have Da Vinci's inventions to thank for this early technological advancement, which led to us getting to outer space in the 1940s, which is maybe the best bit of exposition explanation in the book, and just in general that I've read. It's pretty ridiculous. Oh, and of course we also get to watch our heroes fight aliens, because space. Number 7. What if the world knew Daredevil was blind? Yeah, this is a weird story, especially because it kind of implies that if Daredevil wasn't blind and didn't have superpowers, his life would actually be better or easier. As though, like, you know, if you're blind, your life is gonna be terrible, but if you're not blind, your life is great, which I don't think is true. That's not how that works. I mean, he's also still got an enemy in Wilson Fisk, I'd assume, so I just feel like this is a big oversimplification. In this story, the world finds out that Daredevil is blind, and as a result, those close to him begin to piece together that Daredevil is in fact Matt Murdock, because you know, Matt Murdock is blind. Get it? He then ends up having his sight restored via an operation, unmasks, and lives happily ever after with Karen, trading his heroic initials of DD for DA and becoming the new district attorney of New York. He's swapping it out. I also love how Karen's like, oh, thank goodness you're not a superhero, now we can get married. Number 6. What if Black Bolt talked in his sleep? This is a very short story, and I think you can imagine how it ends if you are familiar with the Inhuman King known as Black Bolt, but it's also just very humorously written. You can find this single-page story near the back of issue 9 of What If Volume Number 2. Apparently when Black Bolt eats pineapple pizza before bed, it has disastrous consequences. Also, good to know what kind of pizza Black Bolt likes. I personally also love pineapple on my pizza, but I feel like that just lets you know if someone's cool or not. Oh, the strange things that you learn about people and pizza. If Black Bolt talked in his sleep all the time, the Inhumans would have a lot of rebuilding to do all the time. I also just like how resigned some of these Inhumans are in that last panel. Like, oh, he did it again, I guess I'm just gonna sleep on some rubble for the rest of the night. That's just how it is, shucks. And only Medusa is the one that's mad. She's like, baby, I told you not to eat that pizza. This always happens. Number 5. What if Wolverine had a styrofoam skeleton? Issue 100 is just one of the best for some real weird weird stories. One of the stories it offers us is only told through a mock-up cover, but it's so good it's just gotta be mentioned because the cover is just too good. It also is presented beside another great mock-up cover offering an alternate story where Peter Parker became Sheep Boy instead of Spider-Man. Sheep Boy, I love it. In the Wolverine mock-up, we're offered an alternate Logan who goes by the codename Wolverwimp. He is cowering on the front cover, about to have his styrofoam skeleton ripped out by Maggie Nito, a mean little girl. I also just love the reference to Wolverine also losing his nose when he lost his adamantium that's on there. Mock-up what if stories are actually the best. I wish we got a full story of this. Someone write that, please. Number 4. What if Iron Man was trapped in the time of King Arthur? The craziest thing about this what if is that it's actually kind of an alternate retelling of a real-life main continuity story where Iron Man was transported to Camelot in medieval times with Dr. Doom and managed to escape. Although this story offers the alternative of, what if he wasn't able to escape and only Dr. Doom got out? You can find it in What If Volume 1, Issue 33. The answer to the question is that Iron Man would be drained of energy, get frustrated in realizing that, he couldn't rebuild a time machine, and ends up becoming Sir Anthony of Iron, an Iron Knight at King Arthur's Round Table. In fact, he uses his suit to help protect the realm from the evil Morgana, defeating her, but in the ensuing battle is unable to prevent King Arthur from becoming mortally wounded. With his dying breath, Arthur makes Sir Anthony his successor, even though they kinda just met, but it's fine I guess. Which means that the Anthony of Iron Man's past, his past self from the future, would probably be really weirded out if he ever read any stories of Camelot. He'd be like, Sir Anthony of Iron became the king. Wait. I'm Iron Man. What? Maybe that was actually his inspiration in the alternate reality to create the Iron Man suit. And now Tony's just stuck in like a time loop. Number 3. What if Wolverine was the Lord of Vampires? In this story, Wolverine becomes the new Lord of Vampires, which is kinda weird considering what we know of Wolverine's healing factor now, but this is also obviously an alternate reality and a story that was written in the 90s, so there's that. Here Wolverine is transformed into a vampire by Dracula. It also features a sweet vampire hunter version of Punisher who is sporting Doctor Strange's cape, and I personally think that the Punisher looks amazing in that cape. So lavish, I just want him to wear capes all the time now. In the end, Punisher is defeated, but Wolverine has a crisis of conscience and ends up flipping to the side of good once more, killing himself and all the other vampire supes and villains he'd made at the same time. And for some reason, Doc Ock's body and tentacles turn to dust. Now, shouldn't his tentacles be okay though? Because they're not made of his tissue. Also, I love when people are like, you're dust, and all their clothes become dust. I'm like, shouldn't their clothes be fine? Anyways, it's a small technical thing, but it bothers me. Number 2. What if paper skin? Remember when we were talking about issue 100 of volume 2 of What If? Well, an actual story that is featured in there is called Paper Skin. It is honestly such a strange story. I need to share it with you. This is a what if story that seems to posit the question of what if Mr. Sinister could offer Gambit a cure for Rogue's powers. It's revealed in the story that Gambit has already betrayed the X-Men by bargaining with Sinister, offering important Cerebro files in exchange for what he wants. Although what Gambit wants is not actually for him, but is kind of for all mutant kind, a cure to the legacy virus. As he's about to leave after getting that cure, Sinister offers him something else that he simply can't resist. A cure for Rogue, his one true love, to help her control her powers. He agrees to steal one more thing for Sinister in exchange for the cure, a tithe box. Sinister has been searching for them and collecting them over the years. In the end, Rogue accepts the cure but can't accept that Gambit has been helping Sinister, and so she kills him, taking his powers and also his looks seemingly, which is kind of weird. It's like Gambit with and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this art, but okay. She goes after Sinister only to find the secret of what the boxes contained was Marvel Comics! Gasp. Now Sinister has so much information because he's been reading Marvel Comics. What a weird reality. What a meta reality. Number 1. What if Avengers vs. X-Men? In this bizarro story, Magneto helps to ensure that Hope ends up getting the Phoenix Force instead of it being split up into Iron Man by 5 parts, which possesses and creates the Phoenix 5. Magneto is seemingly helping Hope to control these new and awesome powers, but when she struggles and begins to turn dark, he suggests she give him some power to help her. In reality, Magneto kinda wants all the power for himself, which is just what he takes. This all happens in the last issue, by the way, of this 4-part What What If story. And after Magneto takes the power, it gets pretty weird. Yeah, that's not where it ends. It just keeps going forever. He takes the power and is instantly corrupted by it. As such, Xavier somehow uses his powers to temporarily mess with Magneto's sight, despite the fact that Magneto is wearing his helmet, and then Wolverine snicks him through the eyes. This results in Magneto basically exploding, killing everyone on the planet, and destroying the Earth. Then Jean shows up randomly and just kind of reveals she saw all of this coming. She uses her Phoenix powers to fix the planet, bringing back plant and animal life, but not people for some reason. She says it's up to her and Wolverine as basically an Eve and an Adam of sorts to do that. She could have just brought all those people back, I'm pretty sure, because she's got the power of the Phoenix, but yeah, it's a weird one. It's a weird one.